Okay, so, a lot of us have this vision, right? Financial security, freedom, but actually getting there, it often feels, well, overwhelming, like you're just lost in this fog of jargon and complexity. So today, we're doing a deep dive. We're looking at some really powerful sources that kind of cut through that fog. They challenge the usual thinking and offer a clearer blueprint, for you to take absolute charge of your financial life. Our mission really is to cut through the noise, uncover some maybe surprising facts, and reveal those specific details. That's the key, the details that can genuinely transform things for you. It doesn't matter where you're starting from. Think of it like a shortcut, to getting properly informed, mastering money instead of
letting it master you. Exactly. And what's truly compelling about this material, I think, is how it goes beyond just the mechanics of money. It really digs into the psychology, the emotions driving our financial choices. We'll be looking at precise figures, and some great stories that make this whole complex world feel remarkably clear and actionable. Understanding those tiny details really is where the difference lies.
So let's unpack that a bit. When we're chasing money, what are we really after?
Yeah, the research points to something deeper than just the dollars, right?
It's about feelings.
Exactly. Feelings money can unlock. Empowerment, freedom, security.
The ability to help out loved ones.
Choice. Just feeling well, alive.
But for so many people, that feeling of freedom just stays elusive, out of reach.
Which brings up a big question. Why do so many people struggle financially? The details from our sources, they paint a really clear picture.
And some of it's pretty surprising.
It really is. You might be shocked to hear that 77% of Americans say they have financial worries. 77%.
Wow.
Yet only 40% have any kind of spending or investment plan in place.
Just drifting along, basically.
Seems like it. And consider this specific detail. 1 in 3 baby boomers has less than $1,000 saved for retirement.
$1,000. That's stark.
It really is. These aren't just stats. They hint at a much bigger challenge.
And it's not just about how much you earn either. That's a key point in the sources.
Absolutely.
I mean, you look at people like Francis Ford Coppola, the director, Mike Tyson, the boxer, actress Kim Basinger. These are people who earned millions, multi-millions, and they lost it all.
Why?
Because they didn't apply the fundamentals. They missed the basic principles of financial mastery, those crucial details.
And if we zoom out, look at the bigger picture. This whole do-it-yourself pension system.
Started with the 401k back in the early 80s, right?
Yeah, that's largely when it kicked off. And, well, by many measures, it just hasn't worked out for a lot of people. A staggering 53% of American households are considered at risk, meaning they might not have enough saved for retirement to keep their living standard.
Over half.
Over half.
Yeah.
And even that old rule of thumb, the 4% rule for taking money out.
I've heard that debated a lot recently.
Yeah. Well, a 2013 Wall Street Journal piece flat out declared it dead. Think about this. If you retired in January 2000, followed that rule, by 2010, you'd have lost a third of your money.
Ouch.
And you'd only have about a 29% chance your money would actually last your whole lifetime.
So relying on that old wisdom is risky.
Extremely. These details, they really reveal a systemic problem. It demands we look closer.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. Let's dive into the nuts and bolts, the details of why the system can feel rigged against the average person investing. You ever hear these terms thrown around like CDOs, REITs, MBSs?
Collateralized debt obligations, real estate investment trusts,
Right.
Mortgage-backed securities. Yeah, it's alphabet soup, often deliberately complex.
Exactly. Or HFT, high-frequency trading.
Ah, yes. The speed there is just unbelievable. Our sources explain that something like 50% to 70% of all the trades happening every single day, they're generated by machines, super fast computers.
Not people clicking buttons.
Not like us clicking on E-Trade. I mean, it takes us, what, half a second, 500 milliseconds to click them out?
Yeah.
Feels fast enough.
Right. But in that same half second, these supercomputers can buy and sell thousands of shares, hundreds of times over. They're making tiny, tiny profits on each trade, but doing it constantly.
Wow.
And get this detail. One HFT firm actually spent $250 million just to straighten out the fiber optic cables running between Chicago and New York.
Why?
To shave 1.4 milliseconds off the time it takes the signal to travel. 1.4 thousandths of a second.
That's insane. That's the kind of edge they have.
That's the sophisticated edge they possess. It highlights how hard it is for an individual to compete on that level.
Which leads us to something one source calls the offer. And it sounds, well, kind of crazy when you hear it laid out.
Okay, what is it?
Imagine this. You put up 100% of the money for an investment. You take 100% of the risk. If it makes money, great. But the other party takes 60%, maybe more, just in fees.
60%?
Yeah. And if it loses money, well, you lose.
Yeah.
But they still get paid their fees.
That sounds completely absurd. Who would agree to that?
Well, here's the kicker. The sources reveal that if you're like 90% of Americans invested in a typical mutual fund, you probably already agreed to terms pretty similar to that.
Without even realizing it.
Often, yeah. It's buried deep in the fine print, those little details again.
Which brings us to fees. This is so critical. Their long-term impact is just massive. One source gives this powerful example. Take $100,000. Let it grow at 7% a year for 30 years. Seems reasonable.
Okay.
Now, if you're paying 3% in annual fees, you end up with about $324,000.
Still sounds like a lot.
Wait, now just reduce those fees to 2%. Suddenly, you have over $432,000.
Big difference already.
Huge. Now, cut the fees to just 1% annually. Your $100,000 goes to nearly $575,000.
Well, that's nearly double the 3% scenario.
Exactly. Almost twice as much, just from shaving off 2% in fees. There's this report, the Retirement Savings Drain. It calculated that the average worker loses something like $155,000 just to 401k fees over their lifetime.
Just gone. Poof.
And for someone earning more, it could be over $277,000 lost to fees.
These specific numbers really hit home. You have to pay attention to those costs.
You absolutely have to scrutinize every single cost.
And okay, what about those 5-star funds? People think, oh, I'm safe. I only pick the top-rated ones.
Right. That's a common strategy. And Morningstar data shows it's popular. Over a decade, 72% of the money going into funds, that's about $2 trillion, went into 4- and 5-star rated funds.
So people trust the stars.
They do. But here's the insight from someone like David Swenson, the guy who managed Yale's endowment incredibly successfully.
What does he say?
He explains that those star ratings, they just reflect past performance. They tell you nothing about the future.
Hindsight is 20/20.
Precisely. And he says chasing those past winners is actually, quote, a guaranteed way to have a lower return.
Guaranteed lower return. That's counterintuitive.
It is. He also talks about the Lake Wobegon effect, where everyone thinks they're above average.
Like how 93% of drivers think they're better than average?
Exactly. In finance, that kind of motivational bias, that little bit of overconfidence, it can be financially lethal. Believing you can pick the winners based on stars, it's a trap.
Okay, another point the sources bring up is this illusion around average returns.
Oh yeah, this one is subtle but so important.
Explain that. How can an average be misleading?
Okay, imagine a market that goes up 50% one year, then the next year it goes down 50%.
Okay, up 50, down 50.
The simple average return is 0%, right? Plus 50, 50, 2 equals 0.
Makes sense.
But what happens to your actual money? Let's say you start with $100,000. Year 1, up 50%. Now you have $150,000.
Great.
Year 2, down 50%. But that's 50% of $150,000. So you lose $75,000.
Leaving you with $75,000.
Right. You start with $100, hey, now you have $75K. That's not a 0% return, is it?
No, that's a 25% loss.
Exactly. And if that kind of volatility happens over, say, 4 years, you'd actually be down over 43%, even if the simple average return looks okay.
That's a massive detail people probably miss all the time. Focusing on the average hides the real impact of volatility.
It really does. It's about the sequence of returns, not just the average.
So this all leads to a big question. Who can you actually trust?
A fundamental question. And the sources have some startling details here, too. Like this one. 49% of managers running actively managed mutual funds. They own 0 shares in the fund they manage.
Half of them. They don't even invest in their own product.
Almost half. It's that old saying, right? The chef doesn't eat his own cooking.
That doesn't inspire confidence.
Not really. And then there's the 401k situation. 90% of plans apparently require mutual funds to pay to play fees just to be offered as an option.
So the choices I have in my 401k, they might be there because they paid to be, not because they're the absolute best for me.
That's often the case, yes. The selection can be driven by maximizing profits for the 401k providers and fund companies, not necessarily maximizing your returns.
You really need to understand how the custom works behind the scenes.
Knowing these operational details is critical.
Okay, last thing in this section, annuities. They get a bad rap, often.
They really do, and often for good reason, especially variable annuities. Some of those can have fees as high as 4.7% a year. One source called them the most expensive form of life insurance available.
Yikes. So avoid them.
Well, the sources make a distinction. They introduce something called fixed indexed annuities, or FIAs.
Okay, what's different about those?
When structured properly, FIAs offer some pretty unique benefits. First, 100% principal protection. Your initial investment is guaranteed by the insurance company.
So you can't lose your starting money.
Correct. Second, you get upside potential without the downside risk. You participate when the market goes up.
But if the market crashes...
You don't lose anything that year. Your principal is safe.
Interesting. What else?
And crucially, they can create a guaranteed income stream you literally cannot outlive. Income for life.
That sounds pretty appealing, especially for retirement.
It can be. It's notable that even former Fed Chairman Ben Bernanke, his largest personal assets were actually in annuities.
Really? The Fed chair?
Yeah. It suggests there's strategic value there if they're structured correctly. The specific terms, the details of the contract are absolutely everything.
Okay, so we've uncovered a lot about the landscape, the potential pitfalls, the hidden costs. What can people actually do? Let's talk practical steps.
Right. Actionable strategies.
According to our sources, the single most important financial decision you'll ever make is deciding how much of your paycheck you get to keep before you spend anything else.
Paying yourself first.
Exactly. Think of it like a tax you pay, but you pay it to yourself, into your future.
It sounds simple, but it's foundational. It's how you start building what the sources call your money machine.
Your investments that grow over time.
Yeah, that consistent habit of saving first, letting compounding do its thing. It's the bedrock. It's those small, regular actions that build real wealth.
Okay, let's get into some specific ways to maybe speed things up, accelerate that journey. And some of these are about saving more, often in ways people overlook, like your mortgage.
Oh, the mortgage is a huge one. The potential savings there are massive, and it often comes down to a simple tweak.
How so?
Okay, take an average U.S. home, maybe $270,000. A 30-year loan at 6% interest. Pretty standard.
Right.
If you just make one extra payment each month, but specifically paying down next month's principal, just an extra $270 in this example, you can pay off that 30-year mortgage in only 15 years.
Cut the time in half. Just like that.
Just like that. And you cut the total interest paid by nearly 50%.
Wow, so on a bigger loan, like $1 million home.
That could easily be $500,000 back in your pocket over the life of the loan. It's an incredibly powerful detail.
That's amazing. What about cars? That's another big expense.
Huge expense. The sources tell a story about someone giving up a fancy BMW lease.
To free up cash.
Exactly. Now, they're not saying you have to give up your dream car, especially if your plan is working. But if you're not hitting your financial goals as fast as you want,
reevaluating your wheels could make a big difference.
A really significant difference. It's a major financial lever that many people are hesitant to touch, but the savings can be substantial.
This reminds me of the latte factor.
Ah, yes, the classic example, but still so relevant.
It's a metaphor, right? For all those small daily spends that add up.
It really is, and the numbers are eye-opening. Our source breaks it down, just a $4 a day coffee habit.
Okay, $4.
If you invested that instead, say at 6% interest, over 20 years, you've effectively given up almost $56,500 in savings.
$56,000 from a daily coffee.
Yeah, and if it's more like $10 a day on little things.
Lunch, snacks.
Right. Over 20 years, you're looking at over $141,000 you've essentially spent away.
That's a 4-year college education.
Exactly. It really puts those small daily choices into perspective. Even bigger impulse buys can be managed. Like Lisa saving 20-30% just by having her husband check online for better deals before buying.
Small habits, big impact, every little detail matters.
It all adds up.
Okay, so saving is crucial. But the other side of the coin is earning more.
Absolutely. You need to fuel the machine. This means constantly looking for ways to add more value, to adapt.
And the need to adapt seems more urgent than ever.
It really does. The pace of change is incredible. There are researchers at Oxford. They suggest nearly half of all current jobs in America are at risk of being automated within 20 years.
Half? That's huge.
Think about truck drivers. There are 3.5 million of them in the U.S. alone. What happens when we have robotic, self-driving trucks that can run 247 with no salary?
That's a massive potential disruption.
It underscores the need to constantly retool, learn new skills, find ways to provide value that a machine can't easily replicate.
And then there's a really provocative idea. Changing your zip code.
Yes, geographic arbitrage.
What if moving somewhere less expensive could literally cut a decade or more off the time it takes you to reach financial freedom?
And potentially improve your quality of life while you're still young enough to really enjoy it.
It's a radical thought for some, But for others, it could be a complete game changer, worth considering the details of your location's cost.
Definitely a powerful lever.
Okay, let's pivot to investing itself. We've talked about fees and pitfalls.
Yeah.
What about the actual strategy? How do the super successful invest?
Yeah, the sources dive into the playbook of the top 0.001%, the billionaires, and it's less about picking the next hot stock.
And more about
Strategic asset allocation, how you divide your money between different types of investments, paying meticulous attention to how those pieces fit together.
Okay, so how do they manage risk? That seems key.
Absolutely. David Swenson at Yale, the endowment manager we mentioned.
Grew it from $1 billion to over $23 billion.
Yeah, averaging nearly 14% a year. Incredible record. He emphasizes having equity stocks as the core, especially if you have a long time horizon. He often suggests putting maybe 70% in what he calls the risk growth bucket.
70% in growth assets. That requires some tolerance for ups and downs.
It does. But what if you really hate losing money? Or you want serious protection against crashes, like that 50% drop in 2008-09.
Yeah, what then?
Well, the sources feature Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater, a massive hedge fund. He outlined his all-seasons portfolio.
All seasons, meaning it does well no matter what.
That's the goal. It uses very specific percentages designed to thrive, or at least survive, in any economic weather: inflation, deflation, growth, recession.
What are the percentages? What are the details there?
Okay, it's 40% in long-term U.S. Treasury bonds,
40% in long-term bonds.
30% in stocks,
Mm-hmm.
15% in intermediate-term bonds, then 7.5% in gold and 7.5% in commodities.
Quite different from the 70% stocks approach. Much more balanced.
Very balanced. And what's fascinating is its history. Even during the 1970s, with crazy high inflation and interest rates, Dalio's all-seasons model had only one losing year. It returned almost 10% annualized, even when the S&P had back-to-back losses over 40% in 73-74.
Wow. So it really smooths out the ride.
That's the design. It aims to prevent those huge drawdowns. In 2008, when the market tanked 50%, one model of this portfolio was down less than 4%.
Less than 4% versus 50%. That's incredible protection.
It shows the power of that specific, careful diversification.
So for the average person who isn't Ray Dalio, what's the practical advice?
Experts like Swenson and also Jack Bogle, the founder of Vanguard, they strongly advocate for low-fee index funds.
Just buying the whole market, basically.
Pretty much. It's the ultimate diversification tool, as they put it. Gives you broad exposure at the absolute lowest cost.
And cost is key, as we saw.
Absolutely crucial. And even Warren Buffett, maybe the most famous stock picker ever, even he has come around to recommending index funds as the best, most cost-effective choice for most people.
If Buffett says it.
It carries weight.
Okay, so you set up your allocation, maybe using index funds.
Yeah.
What then? Do you just leave it?
Good question. No, there's a vital piece of maintenance called rebalancing.
Rebalancing. What's that involve?
It's simple in concept, but requires discipline. Let's say you decided on 30% stocks, 40% bonds.
Okay.
But then stocks have a great run, and suddenly they make up 75% of your portfolio.
Because they grew faster.
Right. Rebalancing means you sell some of those stocks, the ones that went up, and buy more bonds to get back to your target 60-40 split.
So you're selling high.
And buying low automatically. It forces discipline.
Because our instinct is usually the opposite, right?
Yeah.
Chase the winners, sell the losers.
Exactly. Human nature pushes us the wrong way. Rebalancing imposes that logical, disciplined approach. It's a simple detail, but vital for long-term success.
And don't forget taxes. That's another huge drag if you're not careful.
Oh, absolutely. Tax efficiency is critical. The sources hammer this point. They highlight Roth IRAs and Roth 401k specifically, calling them the best legal tax havens out there for individuals.
Why Roth? What's the advantage?
It's often explained with a seed versus harvest analogy.
Okay.
With a Roth, you pay taxes on the money you put in now the seed. It goes in after tax. But then all the growth, all the withdrawals in retirement, the harvest, it's completely tax-free forever.
So you pay tax on a small amount now to avoid tax on a potentially much larger amount later?
Precisely. Dr. Jeffrey Brown, who advised the White House, basically says young people should absolutely pour as much money as you can into that Roth because you pay little or no tax now and potentially save a fortune later.
Makes sense, especially if you expect to be in a higher tax bracket later in life.
Exactly. And for small business owners, there are even more powerful tools like cash balance plans. These allow for massive, fully tax-deductible contributions. Like, in 2014, a 65-year-old owner could potentially put away almost $300,000 combined into their 401k, profit sharing, and cash balance plan, all tax deductible.
Wow, that could dramatically shorten the time to financial freedom.
Absolutely. Understanding and using these specific tax strategies is a huge accelerator.
Okay, we've covered so much ground: pitfalls, the strategies, the specific tactics.
Yeah.
But what if someone knows all this stuff, yet they still can't seem to do it? They struggle to act.
Ah, yes, the psychology. This is huge.
Yeah.
The sources argue that success in life and finance is a big part of life, is maybe 80% psychology and only 20% mechanics.
80% mindset.
That's the idea. Often it's not the strategy that's missing. It's a limiting story we tell ourselves, or some deep-seated belief that holds us back.
A small internal thing causing massive external roadblocks.
Exactly. It's about how we feel, our emotional state.
And how do we change that?
Well, the research suggests something really interesting. Emotions are created by motion, by how we use our bodies.
Motion creates emotion. How does that work?
There was a study at Harvard. They had people just change their posture, stand in a power pose, hands on hips, chest out for only 2 minutes.
Just standing differently for 2 minutes.
That's it. And the results were physical, biochemical. Their testosterone levels, the confidence hormone, went up 20%, and their cortisol, the stress hormone, dropped by 25%.
Wow, just from posture.
Yeah, it's not just in your head. Changing your physiology actually changes your biochemistry, making you feel more assertive, more willing to take risks, more capable.
So you can literally change your state by changing your stance.
It's a powerful tool. Understanding these subtle biological details can make a real difference in your ability to take action.
Which leads perfectly into this quote from the sources that really struck me. Knowledge is not power. It's potential power.
That's big.
Knowledge is not mastery. Execution is mastery. Execution will trump knowledge every day of the week.
So true. It's not what you know, it's what you consistently do. That's the gap we need to bridge.
And bridging that gap, taking action, it connects to a deeper purpose, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The final point the sources really drive home is about meaning. True, lasting fulfillment doesn't come from what you get. It comes from what you give.
Like the Dalai Lama says, happiness is not something ready-made. It comes from your own actions.
Precisely. And there's that tragic story of Adolf Merkel, a billionaire, $9 billion fortune.
But he died feeling like a failure.
Yeah, because he tied his entire identity to the money. When some of it was threatened, his sense of self collapsed. It's a powerful warning about connecting who you are with what you have.
True wealth is more than just the bank balance.
So much more.
That resonates with me personally. I had this experience as a kid. My family was struggling, and someone gave us a Thanksgiving dinner.
Wow.
It changed everything for me. It sparked this lifelong commitment to giving back. I started small, feeding 2 families.
And it grew from there.
Yeah, then hundreds,
Yeah.
then thousands. Now, through foundations, we help provide millions of meals. And I even did this crazy thing.
How was that?
Signed legally binding contracts to pay for college for 23 fifth graders.
You paid for their college. Amazing.
But there was one condition, a specific detail. They had to do 20 hours of community service every single year.
Ah, interesting. Why the service requirement?
Because I wanted them to learn they had something valuable to give, not just things to get.
That's profound. Teaching contribution.
It teaches you that you matter, that you can make a difference. And honestly, that feeling, that act of giving, it builds a different kind of wealth, a deeper fulfillment, faster than just getting ever will.
That's a powerful insight. Giving builds wealth. That specific detail about the community service, what a lesson.
So what an incredible deep dive today. We've really unpacked a lot. From the startling details about hidden fees and misleading averages,
To the power of paying yourself first, those simple saving strategies.
and even the specific asset allocation secrets of billionaires like Ray Dalio.
And we connected all those practical mechanics back to the crucial role of our psychology, our mindset, and what true wealth, real meaning is actually about. It's not just the numbers.
Definitely not. It's about gaining that freedom, that peace of mind, so you can live the life you really want.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now?
It means you have the power. Right now, you can stop tolerating the excuses, those limiting stories you tell yourself. You can use your body, use your mind as tools to shift into a state of sheer will, determination.
Yeah, because the ultimate takeaway here from this whole deep dive, it's that real financial freedom, real fulfillment. It doesn't just come from knowing more stuff. It comes from making informed choices, understanding the crucial details, and then taking consistent, massive action.
Execution is mastery.
That's it.
So here's a final thought to leave you with, a provocative one. If knowledge is only potential power and execution is what truly matters, what one specific detail, what one specific action from everything we discussed today will you choose to act on? Right now, immediately, to start reshaping your financial reality.
Because the game is absolutely winnable.
But only if you decide to get in there and actually play.